Here we're going to tie a Mosquito dry fly. First thing we're going to do is get our thread started. I'm going to take it about halfway or so down the shank of the hook. Next thing to do is to tie in the tail. For this I'm going to use some Grizzly feather. I'm just going to strip out a clump of these fibers. It's about 20 or so, maybe a few more. Nice generous clump. This is going to be our tail. And we're going to tie a tail in that's about half the length of the shank of the hook. I'm going to take those hackle fibers, I'm going to tie them right on top of the shank of the hook, taking it back towards the bend. And I'm going to take my thread forward. Now it's important that you keep a nice smooth body on this fly. We'll explain here in a bit why. Next thing I'm going to do is I take a couple of tips of a Grizzly feather and I strip all the fibers back until I expose a tip that's about the length of the shank of the hook. Very tip of the feather. Now I'm going to tie this tip in right up about a quarter of the way up, quarter of the way from the eye. And you want these wings to stand straight up. This is probably one of the more difficult portions of the flies, to get these wings tied in and get them to stand straight up. There we go. If you get a couple of stray fibers, you can just trim those out of there. Trim out the stem. And you do the same thing on the other side. And this is a step that you don't necessarily really need to do. I'm sure some people say that you do, but this is just for looks. It's how the fly's always been tied. It's always had these very distinct wings, but realistically fish don't probably care too much, and you could probably skip this step and get away with it just fine. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay a few wraps right behind them and also right in front of them, so kind of keep them in place and wedge them into their spot. Once I've got those wings tied in, we're ready to tie in the body material, which is another Grizzly feather, but this is just the quill. I've stripped off all of the barbs from this feather. We're going to tie this feather in right on our side of the hook. We're going to wrap it down the shank nice and smooth. The reason we're doing all smooth wraps on the body is because when we wrap this quill, we need a smooth base to wrap it on so it doesn't get sloppy from side to side, or we don't get spaces. Then I'm going to stop my thread just behind the wings. We're going to take this quill. Now, I haven't soaked this quill, but it's actually easier if you take this quill and soak it in some warm water before you start wrapping it. We'll just see how this goes here. Hopefully it doesn't break on me. Soaking it in the water makes it more supple and a little easier to wrap. As you get towards the thicker stuff like I am here, it gets much stiffer. And I've had them break on me in the past, but we'll see if I can get away with it. And we're going to wrap this quill almost all the way forward. I'm going to stop just short. That'll give me a place to wrap my hackle. Then we can capture that quill and trim the excess out of there. Now the next thing to do is to get out our hackle. I've got a Grizzly hackle here. I can measure it out so that the barbs just touch the point of the hook. I'm going to tie this hackle in right on the side of the hook as well, giving myself a nice smooth base to wrap it on here. I could trim out the excess. I'm going to jump my thread to in front of these wings, build up a little bit of a base here for my hackle, There we go, smooth it out. I'm going to leave my thread there just hanging from the eye of the hook. Then I'm going to take my hackle pliers and clip into this feather. I'm going to very carefully wrap this feather, trying to get these wraps nice and even. One wrap in front of the other. This one's not cooperating here. Let's try this again. This one's rolling on me a little bit. There we go. I'm going to take it all the way to the wings. And I'm going to jump in front of the wings. Once I get to them, here we go. Pull the wings back. Jump right in front of them. Continue wrapping all the way to the eye. Feather's getting short here. Once I get to the eye, I can capture the hackle. I can get in there nice and tight, trim it out. Try not to cut my thread. And I can whip finish. There we go. And that's all there is to a mosquito. It's not a too difficult of a fly to tie. It uses all one material, all grizzly feathers, but hardest part is probably tying in those wings. You can see how those wings are nice and distinct. They pop right up. That's because my hackle is sized just a hair smaller than those wings, and that's how you tie it. But like I said, those wings, you can skip them. It's not necessarily something that you have to have on your fly. That's all there is to a mosquito. And you can buy all the materials in the riffle, including all the whiting feathers and whiting products as well.